This week on Fishing with Andrew and Jesse.
Welcome everyone to another awesome episode of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. With us today, we have the one and only man with the mustache and beard, Andrew.
How's it going?
I'm also your host, Jesse, if you didn't know. If this is your first time listening to this fishing podcast, you're in for a treat because this is a special episode. This one's a little bit different, but I think that you guys will really, really enjoy it. So before I get into this topic, and by the way, Andrew is not even aware of what we're going to talk to today, which is kind of fun. What are your thoughts, Andrew?
My thoughts are you're going to start calling me out on my shenanigans in the boat, and I'm going to have to, find a new friend later.
It's nothing that bad.
Oh, thank goodness.
So before we get into the main topic, which is the surprise for now, we are going to have, as tradition states, an interesting fishing fact. And to handle that, the man with the mustache and the beard, Andrew.
Well, I just want to mention, so last episode was the first time we didn't have an interesting fishing fact. And that's, again, we had those amazing guests. We had Angela Viola and Pete Bowman from the Fishing Canada show, or from their podcast, the Outdoor Journal radio show. So that was the first time we didn't have a interesting fishing fact. I think, again, well worth it, because those guys are awesome guests, and I want to make as much use of the time as possible. But I figured I'd make it up to everyone and have a very special installment, again, from the Freshwater Fishermans Bible. By Vlad Evanoff.
It's been a while, man. It's been a while.
Has to be done. So we're going to talk about walleye today. And specifically, we're going to talk about Vlad Evanoff's opinion on walleye.
What is that book came out in 1964, if I recall?
That came out in, copyright in 1964.
Wow.
So, walleye. People call them pickerel. We're going to get into that in a minute. But first off, he makes a very bold statement I just want to address right off the hop. He says that walleye are often easier to catch than trout, bass, pike, or muskie. Yes, they're easy to catch than muskie. Easier than bass? Easier than pike? Like the dumbest fish out there? I don't know. But again, this was made back in the 60s when, there was a whole bunch of walleye around in even the pressured lakes. Now, he talks about different names. Have you ever heard any other names for walleye, Jesse?
A lot of people call them pickerel, like you said.
So back then, here are some examples of names. The pike perch, yellow pike, jack salmon, golden pike, yellow pickerel, Susquehanna salmon, opal eye, pickerel, and door. And the last pickerel and door, those were from Canada, he says. There's also a subspecies of walleye known as the blue pike, blue walleye, and blue pickerel, which, again, is just a blue walleye, which I don't know if it's a true subspecies or if it's just like a weird gene defect in their pigments or something like that, or what they eat. But yeah, so he says that you don't need any special tackle to catch walleye. And I'm sure that all the walleye guys are just like in full agreement with that. Absolutely. You don't need any special tackle. He says you can use almost any bait casting, spinning, or spin casting outfit that you have. And light tackle provides the most sport.
Okay. Now, I agree with most of that so far.
Yep. Now, again, we kind of joke around with Vlad, but he makes a lot of good points. I like to pick out the points that are funniest. So don't judge Vlad on only what I'm telling you. Go out, buy the book, and read it yourself. He talked about the most effective lures for walleyes. The most effective lure for walleye. What do you think it is, Jesse?
A twister tail jig or a bucktail jig.
That's what I would have said.
Yeah.
That's not what he said. He says a spinner, such as the June bug type, with a double hook behind it, covered with a minnow, worms, or lamprey eel.
What?
Yeah. Now these spinners, I want to make now when I say spinner, what do you think of?
I think like a map spinner.
Wrong again. So he says they also take various types of spoons and weighted spinners. Now, a Comet or an Aglia or stuff, that's a weighted spinner. So he's talking about those old, like, inline with a spinner blade and a couple beads and then, like, the hooks, like what I would call a worm harness with, like, a spinner in front.
Yeah.
So that's what he's talking about. It's like, yeah, I could see that being the classic bait. And back then, I'm sure that's what was most commonly used. Then he says, and in recent years, some fine catches have been made on the leadhead jigs.
It's like, this was brand new technology back then. A ball of lead on a hook.
Yeah. So he talks about how for live bait, a lively minnow or small fish on a hook will often catch them. Another good bait is a soft-shelled crayfish. I remember seeing an old episode of the Reno Viola actually using soft-shelled crayfish, like for smallmouth bass on one. Yeah. I think it was Lake Simcoe or Lake Ontario or something like that. And for anyone who doesn't know, soft-shelled crayfish is not another subspecies of crayfish. It's literally any crayfish. It just molted, so its shell isn't hard yet. It hasn't hardened up after it cracked out of its last one. Now, speaking of timing, I just want to read this paragraph because he talks about the best time to catch walleye. So in the spring and late fall, you can often catch walleyes most of the day. But during the summer months, the early morning, late afternoon, and evening, and night hours are best.
So all day long.
Almost all day. In fact, walleyes do a lot of feeding at night from spring to fall, and the rest of the year too. And you stand a good chance of catching them in the dark. During the summer months, if you must fish during the day, choose the cloudy, rainy days, or fish early in the morning, at dusk, and during the night. So basically he's making these things sound like they're the most plentiful fish that will bite anything, and you can catch them all the time. I wish that were true, Vlad.
60 years ago, that was probably, a little more accurate,
Yeah.
It's like, how many times has your dad, like my dad used to tell me stories of like these lakes that we fish now, and they were literally choked with fish, and like not just any fish. Like you look at the pictures, they're legitimate 5-6 pound largemouth. And not just one or two. It's like a whole stringer of them. And it's like, oh yeah. And they were just fishing like basic lures. They're like, oh, I caught all these on a jitterbug. It's like, okay, so it was easy.
He talks about like where they can be found. Now this stuff I fully agree with. It just goes to show that fish mentality and what they look for in their life doesn't really change. It might change on a lake as to where it is just because, let's say, the water temperatures have changed over the years, or the seasons are coming earlier or later, so that might make changes. But the fish themselves are looking for the same thing. So he says, look for walleyes below dams, falls, rapids, or riffles, around rocks, boulders, in the quieter pools and eddies. That's in rivers. In lakes, fish around rocky points, rock or gravel bars, weedy bays, and deep water bordering rocky shores. The mouths of streams or rivers entering a lake are also good locations. To the untrained ear, that sounds like every part of the lake anyways. It's like deep water, rocks, not rocks, weeds. That's the kind of stuff we look for still to this day. But then he's talking about, again, like locating where walleye are. He says a good way to locate them is by slow trolling. You can do so with a June bug spinner and a minnow or worms in the hook. Lamprey eels are very good on a hook, also in rivers where this bait is found. Yeah, don't use invasive species as bait, please. He talks about using a jig, which again, for us is like the quintessential thing. Like we grew up looking at people using ball head jig with a twister tail, right? So he's talking about using that in a stream. He says the jig may have to be cast upstream and across to get down deep enough, and then is allowed to swing from the fast current into the slower spots. Now this is critical here, Jesse. I want you to pay attention to when to expect the bite, okay?
Okay.
The strike usually comes as the jig reaches the hole or pocket where the walleye is waiting. It won't come above that pocket where the walleye is waiting. It'll come once it reaches where the walleye is waiting. Keep that in mind. That's a pro tip right there.
So if you cast your bait where the walleye is not waiting, you will not catch a fish. Just as a heads up.
You're a quick learner.
Yeah, I know.
He'd be proud of you.
If I was fishing in 1960, I'd be like Bob Zumi.
I had to laugh when he was talking about how to cook walleye. If I had said, name like 2 ways to prepare walleye, what would you say?
Beer batter?
Yep, classic.
Yeah, or just like fried with salt and pepper, I guess.
Yeah, fried or like a baked walleye or something, like an almond crust or something, like delicious. He's like, he talks about the meat. They have a firm, sweet, tasty flesh which can be fried, baked, broiled, or boiled. Love that boiled walleye.
Sounds very gross.
Now, this is interesting because of all the other species I've read in this book, it's one of the shortest chapters, honestly. And at the end of it, he has an interesting section or a few paragraphs, which I had never seen in any of the other species here. And he spot burns all kinds of spots for walleye.
Wow.
He says, You can't beat Canada.
Big spot burn.
Yeah, Canada is great for walleye. Down the Hudson's Bay Basin, the Great Lakes Basin, over into Labrador, Quebec, Ontario. Like, okay, that's not spot burning. But then he talks about the states. He says they're especially plentiful in Wisconsin, such as Lake Winnebago, Red Cedar River, Wapagasset Lake, Balsam Lake, Half Moon Lake, Yellow River, St. Croix Lake, Eau Claire Lakes, Whitefish Lake, and Lac Court Oriels are fished. And then in Minnesota, he lists a bunch more. He's like spot burning everyone's favorite spots in these things. There are literally 3 paragraphs of him just mentioning different lakes and rivers at the end of this chapter. I don't know why.
Not cool, Vlad.
One, it's a short chapter, and then like the last page is just him mentioning all the different lakes he knows of that has walleye in them. I just find that kind of funny. But hope I didn't spot burn your favorite place
in Canada.
By the way, Rice Lake has walleye.
It sure does. And eventually I plan to catch one there. Just kidding. All right, that was interesting. It is good to hear from our good dead friend Vlad Evanoff from his 1964.
We don't know that for sure.
I guarantee that guy's dead. He wrote that book in 1964, right? So that means he wrote it before
he looks 40 on the cover.
Yeah, he's definitely been buried. And I'll tell you, when we started mentioning that book, I had a bunch of people last season when we I don't know, Andrew probably did 3 or 4 Vlad Evanoff interesting fishing facts. And they asked us, what book is it from? And we're like, oh, well, it's this book. So we actually found it on Amazon. And I had a few people tell me they actually ordered the book. So imagine just awesome. Like randomly, Vlad Evanoff's like great granddaughter right now was like, her Amazon account just went up $8. And she's like, what the? No one's bought this book for 80 years.
That's awesome.
So anyway, again, Andrew mentioned before, last week on the episode was with Angelo Viola and Pete Bowman on Outdoor Radio Journal. That was cool. I had so many people message us and be like, you know what, that was cool. Like, what a experience for you guys. And it definitely was. It was very surreal. We kind of wish that we were in studio with them, but it was the next best thing. And they're such approachable, chill guys. It was kind of just like, sitting down with a bunch of guys that we knew all our lives, because we've been watching them all our lives on TV. But it was very cool. And we were happy enough to go.
They invited us out on the boat. Oh, you look surprised. Oh, they just invited me. I'm sorry, Jesse.
Sorry.
I wish.
But anyway.
FNC1. Yeah.
Yeah. If you haven't listened to that episode, I highly recommend going back and listening to that, because it was truly an honor to be on their show and to have them on our show as well. It's kind of a milestone for this podcast. We would like to thank everyone for all your support. We're just going to mention now too, a little bit of housekeeping. We really appreciate all those Patreon members that donate a few bucks every month to help us keep this show running every week, so that me and Andrew aren't paying for the show out of our pockets, because we're just poor old boys. We're not rich yet from this show. Definitely not. But
I don't have 2 spoons to rub together.
Yeah. 2 Len Thompsons rubbing together. But we do appreciate that. We also appreciate everyone who's listening. We look at the reviews every week. We're going to actually read some of the reviews at the end of this episode, some new ones, which are awesome. We look at all the reviews every week, and we check the rankings a few times, and it was great to see the last few weeks. They've been really, really good. So that's awesome. But we're going to get into today's topic, and you're probably wondering, because, as cool as Vlad Evanoff is in the Freshwater Fisherman's Bible of 1964, we're going to talk about something that's new. You know what that new thing is?
No.
Andrew's beard. And my beard. So I thought we could do an episode. I had a few people mention they saw us at the shows, and they saw Andrew with a full beard, and they saw me with my full beard. Not as full as Andrew's. He's a pretty hairy guy. But I thought we could talk about...
It has some of its benefits.
Yeah. I thought we could talk about the correlation between growing and having a beard and fishing. What do you think, Andrew? Again, this is just sprung on Andrew. I didn't want to tell him because I wanted it to be very organic and fresh.
What a stretch.
Yes. Now, if you are...
We are scraping the bottom of the barrel for content, people. No. Please send an episode request.
I've actually been saving this episode for a long time. I thought of this a while ago, and I was like, that would be a cool episode. So anyway, if you're not someone who can grow a beard, or maybe you're a woman and you can't grow a beard, this will still be entertaining. So I thought we could talk about a few different things. I'm going to mention them first now, and then we'll go through all of them. So we're going to talk about comparing yourself to others with beards and with fishing. Interesting. We're also going to talk about what the patience connection is between growing a beard and also in fishing. We're going to talk about the growth process, and we're also going to talk about the gear connection which has a lot to do with beards and a little bit to do with fishing. So I thought we could start off with just a little bit of a background. So Andrew's a hairy dude. Everyone knows he had a big mustache. That's why for years we said the man with the mustache. He's got a very thick caterpillar on his lip. But for his whole life, he has never grown a beard. Never. Mm-hmm. He always had that weird, interesting mustache.
Not always. I had a mustache for 3 years.
No, but
the longest anyone in my family had a mustache.
I can't remember you without it. So that's as long as it's been. Whenever I see a picture of Andrew like in an old fishing photo and he just doesn't have a mustache, I'm like, who is this child? But Andrew's beard now, it is very thick and it does definitely suit him. But when it comes to me and Andrew, I'm 33. Andrew, what? You're 31 now? You're an old man.
31.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, you forgot how old you are. But during the whole time, we've never had beards until this year. So that's pretty cool. So we just started growing our beards in December. So it hasn't been a long time, but we're going to share what we've learned so far and compare it to fishing. So when it comes to the similarities between fishing and beards, I'd say the first thing that comes to my mind is patience. Now, Andrew may not need as much patience as someone like me. Andrew's a fast grower. So we started growing beards literally at the same time. And he's like, let's grow beards. And I was like, absolutely, let's do it. Right. And Andrew's just like, the next day, he's like, what do you think? And I was like, give me 4 months and we'll see what happens. So Andrew, what would you say when it comes to growing a beard for the average person? Like, we're not just talking about your beard, but like in general, how would you compare the patience required in growing a beard to skills that you may have to learn in fishing?
So with a beard, for someone, I'll use you as an example, Jesse. So someone who doesn't have such luscious facial locks as myself, they usually say you have to wait 3 months before you can really tell if you can grow a beard or not.
Yeah.
Like, let it fill in. It may look patchy. Let it fill in. And you need 3 months growth for it to do that. Now, when you're fishing and learning a new technique, you may need 3 months of trying that technique.
Yes.
I know me learning how to properly jig fish is still an ongoing thing for me. It has taken me months, especially when you can't go out every single day and do it. Thankfully, hair grows every single day without trying. But for fishing, it'll take some time to do it. And you can't give up on a technique or a lure or something like that just because it didn't work the first time you tried. It's like, oh, spooks stink because I never caught a fish when I cast it out and reel in. It's like, well, did you try learning how to walk the dog? Did you try putting in some effort, watching some videos and getting it to work? And you can train your wrist or casting a bait caster. Did you just buy a cheap one and then realize, oh, this backlashed on me twice and now I don't like it anymore.
Yeah.
But if you put the effort in, yeah, you have to learn it. There are skills, and some skills they literally take months or years to learn. But there's many that you can learn in an afternoon. You just got to put your mind to it.
And I'd say one thing, like you said about learning a bait caster. Now, we did a post the other day about learning to use a bait caster on Instagram, and all these, it kind of went viral, and there was like 500 comments on it, and all these people are like, "Oh, I don't need a bait caster. That's for idiots." And bait casters always tangle every single time. I'm like, they obviously don't. If they backlash every single time you use them, they would not be popular. You just never put the time in. So like for the beard connection, I would say, like, I had so many people be like, you know what? I tried to grow a beard, but it didn't look good. And I was like, well, how long did you grow it? They're like, 3 weeks. It's like, it's not enough time, right? You have to wait. Sometimes you can't see the potential coming in. Casting a bait caster, for example, as growing a beard. So like if you've never casted a bait caster and you just pick one up and you're used to using a spinning rod and reel and you go out that first day, it's not going to be good. I guarantee it. Even if you have a DC, like digital control fishing reel, it's not going to be good. You're going to backlash. It's going to be annoying. So when you're if you don't have patience, you're not going to get it down. I've had so many people when I worked at the fishing store, they'd buy a bait casting reel and then I'd talk to them again in a few weeks or a few months and they'd be like, yeah, I gave up. I couldn't do it. It's not for me. I just tangle them all the time. It's like, no, you literally can do it. Mm-hmm. You just have to have patience and keep going. Same with growing a beard. You can't literally say like, I can't grow a beard. It's only been 2 weeks. Just wait. Sometimes you just have to let things happen and keep at it. Again, not that growing a beard requires you to learn a skill like a bait casting reel, but that's the thing with patience too. Another thing with patience too, I'd say with fishing is, for me, I'm not a super patient person. I know Andrew's like a finesse guy. He'll stay at the same spot for like hours just waiting for this one bite.
I love my slow topwater presentations and stuff.
Yeah. I'm more of a run and gun guy, which makes fishing with Andrew sometimes frustrating as heck.
It goes both ways.
Yes. Growing a beard requires patience. Sometimes when the bite is slow, you really, really have to slow down and you need to really cultivate patience, because sometimes especially we were talking a bit with Dan from Great Lakes Finesse a few podcasts ago. Sometimes the fish are so pressured or the weather's just off and you need to really slow down and finesse them and have lots of patience. You can't just be like ripping a spinnerbait through. They don't want that. It can be a huge difference between catching fish and not catching any fish just because you're not patient. You don't have to have a beard. This is a disclaimer. You don't have to have a beard to catch fish, but
it helps.
You look a lot cooler when you do so. That was actually point number 3. Beards and fishing make you look cool. It's
agree.
cool. If I see someone like just walking down the road, I'm like, If they're holding a fishing rod, I'm like, cool. Just kidding. I'm instantly judging them like, where are they fishing?
If I see someone with a surf rod and we are fishing 10-foot creeks, I start judging people.
So we're going to kind of go into the growth process. So like, here's a little bit of backstory. Andrew, like I said, can grow a beard if he just sneezes. It just comes out.
Think Dennis from the SpongeBob movie.
Yes, just pulls down his bandana, just comes out of nowhere. So for me, I was growing my beard, and again, no one in my family's ever had a beard, interestingly enough. So I was kind of like wondering if I could actually do it, but actually not too. My beard's actually not bad. It's not luscious like Andrew's, but my hair has to go somewhere on the top of my head.
Yes,
total burn. But anyway. The growth process. So I think when you grow a beard, it's kind of like you have that initial itchy stage, right?
Yes.
And that's what everyone tells me. And we're going to kind of go back to the same, like the patience thing, because I have so many people be like, oh, you have a beard now. Doesn't it itch? It's like, yeah, for a few weeks it did. And then it didn't. So the way that I would compare that to fishing is sometimes things are terrible or uncomfortable or annoying, like casting a bait caster or casting a center pin reel or learning a new technique, like Andrew said, jig fishing. Sometimes things are annoying, but the only way that they're not going to be annoying sometimes is to get better at them and wait it out. Mm-hmm. So that's how I would kind of wrap up that last point. So if you're doing a new technique, which again, me and Andrew love doing.
Yes.
The other day we were fishing and we were just trying all different techniques. Like we caught a few fish on chatterbaits, like, oh, this is fun. And then it's like, let's try something else. Like we love that. It's absolutely fantastic. But you got to learn new techniques. That'll help you grow as an angler.
It's also a great place to store, like when you're fly fishing, you can just like stick some flies in there and it comes out easier out of your beard than it does out of like your felt patch on your vest. Pro tip.
It's true. So here's another one. Don't compare yourself to others. So that's a huge one I find in fishing. Mm-hmm. Like beards, 100%. 100%. And now I think, again, when you are looking to grow a beard, say you've never grown a beard before, you might look at these guys with the huge Viking beards and you're like, oh, that's what I want. That's what I want right there. But the reality is you don't get to decide. Your genetics decide for you what kind of beard you're going to grow. That has been determined at the time of your birth. There's nothing you can do to change it unless you get some kind of weird surgery, which I don't recommend because it's super weird. Don't compare yourself to others. So I find this in the fishing community. A lot of people will be like, wow, I wish I had a bass boat. Or I wish I had this. Or I wish I had that. It's like, that's cool. I wish I had all this. I wish I had that. But you can do something awesome with what you have. Like, look at me and Andrew. We fished out of canoes for years. Did we ever say, I wish I had a bass boat? Absolutely.
Every single time.
Yes. But in reality, we understand that our circumstances have limitations. So we're not out there every day being like, oh, this is terrible. I wish I had a bass boat. We make the best out of what we have. So how would you connect that, Andrew, to having and growing a beard?
Well, you can always look at someone else and be like, oh, you know what? I wish I had, much thicker beard because then I could grow it nice and long and braid it like Vikings and that'd be awesome. It's like, but guess what? If you don't, you can still have beard styles that work. Look at Johnny Depp. He has a very patchy beard, but he looks cool facial hair because he's got, keeps it kind of short, has this kind of messy long hair. That's fine. See, I have a bigger beard and then I have very short buzzed hair because I have a receding hairline. Jesse has a shorter beard because it's not as thick. So when it grows out, it kind of looks a bit wiry, but when it's trimmed closer, looks great. But he has his cool faux hawk, and that's awesome. By the way, the 90s calls, they want that back.
Hey, I have straight hair. It's either spiky or nothing. Yeah. Spiky or a big puff ball. Yeah. Believe me, Andrew seen me without gel in my hair when we go camping. He's like, what the heck is that? I'm like, it's my head.
Do you want to know what Jesse's hair looks like? Think Booth from Bones. That's what Jesse's hair looks like.
That's my wife's like, Jesse, you kind of look like Booth from Bones. I'm like, I wish. But Andrew makes a very good point. Sometimes things like growing a beard, it's out of your control. I'm not saying you can't save up and buy a bass boat. You totally can. But for most people, realistically speaking, some things are out of your control, especially in this economy. So if you can grow a thick, luscious beard like Andrew, that's fantastic. But I'm not going to compare myself to Andrew and be like, this is not a beard that I have because it doesn't look like Andrew's. Andrew's beard has nothing to do with his ability to grow a beard. That's just the way it is. It's not like it's a special skill he has. So same with me. I'm not like dissing Andrew all the time because I have a full head of hair. I mean, like I do sometimes, but he also disses my beard. So, hey, also have some, laughter is good. But anyway, don't compare yourself to others. So many times when people fishing, I always hear guys in their either whatever circumstances. Some people are just absolute hammers at fishing. That's fantastic. That's not me. I work very hard for every fish that I catch, and I learn and I buy, proper gear to get the job done. Some people just go out and slam fish. It's like their natural ability. I always think like fishing is a learnable skill. That is true, but to be an absolute hammer at it, I think that's just like a born gift that you have. Like you could say, I can learn to play piano. I'm not musical at all. Like I can strum some songs on a guitar, but I'm not very musical. But Andrew's brother, Jeremy, is very musical. He can sit down and learn an intricate guitar song or piano song by ear in like half an hour. Yeah. Now, that's just because I'm not saying he doesn't have, he didn't work hard to do that, but he has that gift. He has that ear that he can do that with that I don't have. Now, so I can't compare myself to him.
Just a little side thing, just so people understand how, musically gifted my brother can be, is we took piano lessons starting at the same time. And then in the same amount of years, I was struggling trying to play grade 5 songs. And Jeremy was doing his grade 13 Royal Conservatory songs.
Yes.
And yeah, he also during that time picked up how to play guitar quite well, drums, just self-taught. Everything was self-taught. The piano, we had lessons of piano, but yeah, in the same amount of time as it took me to learn how to play a 4-string bass because I didn't like playing chords on a guitar. I'm like, I can play single notes one at a time, and I don't like piano.
So exactly, that's the same point. So like, just because you want to be the best at something, sometimes that's not possible. And the reality is you should be happy with what you're doing. Don't compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to yourself last year. Now, I know if I said to Andrew, like 5 years ago, how would you compare yourself now to your fishing ability 5 years ago? Like I've seen Andrew grow a lot, try new techniques, get better at, several different techniques, smash his personal best multiple times because he's learning and he's growing.
I will say this, like even bait casting. So one thing, just casting a bait caster, not skipping, not doing anything fancy, just casting. Jesse is better than me because I know that for a fact, because scientifically he will have his magnetic braking set 4 clicks lower than me all the time. And I backlash more than he does. So and that also doesn't help because I fish a lot of lighter baits too. But if we're fishing the same thing though, Jesse will backlash less than me, and his magnetic braking is set lower. Now at the same time, I look back to myself 5 years ago or even 2 years ago, and I have way less backlashes than I did. So I compare myself to myself. I am very happy with the results I have. But if I'm like, oh, I wish I could cast like Jesse, or I wish I could cast like Kevin Van Dam. Mike Iaconelli just like skipping under docks. It's like, guess what? Neither of us can do that.
We suck. Yeah. So don't compare yourself to others. We're all of us anglers, we're on this together. We all have the love for fishing. We all have different circumstances. Some people can fish once a month. Some people can fish once a day. Like some people fish all the time. So our skill levels and abilities are all over the place. So don't compare yourself. If you see someone else fishing and they're better than you or you're way better than them, we're all fishing. We're all having a good time. Let's not be wieners about it. Some people get a little bit of a cocky attitude. So that is not needed in the fishing community. Another thing that I would compare growing a beard or having a beard to, one thing that I dealt with initially is I kind of got obsessed with like beard products and stuff. Because, I did a lot of research because, again, I'd never grown a beard before. So I was looking up on YouTube, like all the videos on like growing beards and where to trim your neckline and all this, what razors do I need in that? Beard balms, beard oils, all that stuff, right? And it's super easy to get obsessed with that. And I find if you're comparing that to fishing, a lot of people buy a lot of unnecessary products. Now, I'm not saying beard oil and beard balms are unnecessary, but I feel like when you're watching some of these YouTube videos and stuff about growing a beard, they're like, oh, we have this magic beard serum and it helps your beard hair sprout 10 times more than normal. It's like, yeah, that's a load of bogus. Like, like that doesn't work. That's all like, maybe like it's an oil. Like, yes, it'll help hydrate your skin, which may help you get, a little bit better growth that's already there. But you're not just going to use this magic, snake oil that's just going to have you full beard after 2 weeks.
If you use this old used motor oil mixed with transmission fluid and some coconut oil, you too can have a thick, luscious beard.
The main point is unnecessary products. Again, there's lots of it in every industry, everything. There's always something like, oh, this helps. It's amazing. And it's just like, okay, the results are questionable. But I asked Andrew before the podcast started, I said, what are some unnecessary products or things that you think anglers may get caught up in buying that they probably don't need? Because I'll say like growing my beard, what I would say to people if they were just going to grow their first beard, and maybe you're listening to this and you've had a beard and a huge beard for years, you probably already know this. And you're probably like, these guys are rookies, but hey, this is our podcast. We get to talk about it. Is you have to, obviously have, some beard oil and stuff like that, but don't become obsessed with it. You just have to let your beard grow sometimes. You just have to see what you got before you start obsessing about it. So what are some unnecessary products you think that anglers buy?
Things where it's looks like the same product or is very similar, but costs 4 times more, especially with soft plastics. I have a hard time buying them.
Yeah. I would say though, like when it comes to fishing, like I don't care. You can buy whatever you want. And if it makes you happy, do it. Like if you like buying super high end JDM baits, that's great. Go for it.
And I have some.
But at the same, yeah, we buy it. Like we have all kinds of stuff. But I've seen so many people and they get caught up in just buying like, oh, it has to be this bait, and they're 4 of them and they rip very easily, but 4 of them is like $15.99. It's like, that's a lot of money to spend on something that's a disposable item, like a plastic bait that's just going to rip up, right? Mm-hmm. So when it comes down to it, oftentimes, if you're not a professional where money's on the line, more simple baits, just like the classics, you would say, they catch tons of fish. That's why they're classics. They still do. I know there's like hot baits that come out, and especially again, like if you're a tournament angler, you'd be like, oh, you need this hot bait because I want to, win this tournament. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's probably true. But I feel like a lot of the guides that I talk to were like guys that are like hammers, and you look at what they're using, and half the time they're using just the simplest baits. Yeah. Like I fish with this guy, he's a total hammer, fishes bass tournaments. And every time I fish with the guy, he has on like a flippin' jig, a stick bait, like a soft plastic stick bait, and a chatterbait.
Like a yum dinger, like the cheapest stick bait out there.
Yeah, literally. And I'm like, that's it? And he's like, yeah, you just have to put it in front of them. You just have to find them. And I'm not saying that works all the time, but this guy's he's very successful. So it's like, sometimes I think we overcomplicate, or we give bass way too much credit for being like geniuses, but really in reality, most of the time, they're just reacting to their environment.
That's the thing. Like we always talk about, again, I'm going to bring it up again because we always talk about this bait is the chatterbait or a bladed jig.
Yeah.
If you listen to the pros and whatnot, and you look at what they're using, it's the evergreen jackhammer. And yes, it is the best bladed jig on the market. Costs $27 here in Canada.
Yeah.
Per chatterbait. But it's not necessary. So if you have a budget and you're going to fishing and you're like, I really want to try bladed jigs and I have to get this one because they say it's the best. It's like, okay, but have you tried the regular original? Or you want to go a bit fancier, get the new, Z-Man Evo.
Yeah.
It's got a bit upgrades, and it's still $10, $15 cheaper than the jackhammer. The jackhammer still has like a couple, 1 or 2 benefits above it still. But at the same time, I think I might own one jackhammer, and I'm afraid to use it because I don't want to lose it.
Yeah.
But it's like, guess what? I can fish this $11 chatterbait all day. Like I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And we catch fish on it. On the scale that we fish at, I don't really view it as a handicap to fish, something lower end. I know even you've talked before about like the whopper plopper. Great bait. Awesome. Hands down, everyone talks about it as a topwater plopper. It's the whopper plopper. But another one that we both use and have good success with is the Berkeley Chopo.
Yeah.
It costs almost half the price.
Mm-hmm.
It's another plopper style bait. You fish it the exact same way. Comes in very similar colors, but costs half as much. So if you're going to the cottage and like, I have $50 to spend on baits to this year, you could buy either 2 or you could buy 5 and get to try a variety of different things. So we're not saying that oh, they're all the same, it doesn't matter. But there are more budget-friendly options to get on things, to be able to, have more lures to try or more rods or reels. You don't always have to get the top of the line, and if I don't have that, I won't be successful. That's not true.
Yeah. And I'd like to say, like, in my opinion, I feel like those minute differences of buying like these, like, crazy high-end baits or lines or whatever, I feel like, in my opinion, that may make a difference, but it's at a small percentage of the time. So, like, again, let's just say 10% of the time, those little things will make a huge difference. But for the average guy out fishing, or the average girl that's fishing, but the 90% of the time that you're using regular baits, you're still going to catch fish. So don't be brainwashed into thinking that they always, like, the fishing industry is about making money. It doesn't care really about you. There's all kinds of pros that have YouTube channels and they're like, this bait is great. And like, a lot of the tips are great. But you have to think, they're all sponsored by bait companies which want to sell baits. That's why they're in business. They're not in business to make you happy. They're in business to sell baits. Now, of course, obviously the baits have to work, or else generally they won't sell, but take it with a grain of salt whenever you watch a sponsored ad and they're like, listen, this is the best bait ever, and it's by a brand they're sponsored by. It's like, yes, they may believe in it, but they're also being paid to say that. So also take that with a grain of salt, because you don't always need a specific bait, like a high-end bait, like Andrew said. Like, you don't need a jackhammer, buy the Evo. Actually, funny story. We were fishing the other day and I had both. I had a jackhammer, which, if you're not aware, that's a bladed jig. They're about $25. I put a trailer on it. I put the same trailer on the new Z-Man Evo, which Andrew talked about, which are about $12 to $15. They look almost identical. They're almost identical in every way. And there's probably like a 5% difference between them. That's it. Like, the clip may be different and the hook is slightly different, but it's still a razor sharp hook. In fact, the Evo has a really cool bait keeper on it too, which I like better than the jackhammer. And I'm not joking.
For the Z-Man baits, like, if you like Z-Man trailers, the Evo is amazing. I didn't glue it, nothing, and that bait did not shift on me.
Yes.
It was crazy.
Yeah. And I'd have to say, after fishing both of them, I caught at least 10 to 15 fish on each bait. And I have to say, I have no preference over either of them. If you told me that I was fishing an Evo, that it was a jackhammer, I'd believe you. I wouldn't know the difference. So sometimes things are just hyped up. You don't necessarily need them. So I thought we could talk a bit about the gear connection. So fishing gear, we kind of talked about baits and stuff, but having a beard, oftentimes, I know me and Andrew kind of went through this. You buy some stuff, stuff that you need. It's not stuff that is like what we were talking about before, like unnecessary products. But, you have to buy a trimmer and maybe like, a little straight razor so you can get your lines done and all that stuff. Yeah. So
a beard comb to get the oil right down to your skin where you need to hydrate.
You get one of those boar's bristle brushes. It's like, whoosh, whoosh. You know what I really find with those? When you do have an itchy beard when you're first growing one, those boar hair bristle things are great just to itch your face. It's like, oh yeah, just shh. But yeah, that's awesome. So the gear connection. So like for us, like, I bought a trimmer, I bought a bunch of stuff. Like, I bought one of those straight razors and all that stuff. So when it comes to having a beard, and again, you may be one of those people that likes to have the homeless look and just the big fluffy beard with, high cheeks and just straggly look like a ragamuffin. That's a style. If that's you, no offense, that's great. But for us, we like to keep things well trimmed. And like Andrew said, I don't have a super, super thick beard, so I like to keep mine short. I faded it on the sides, a little bit lower on the chin, but Andrew has a more fuller beard, but they're very well groomed. That's just the style that we're going for right now. Could Andrew look like a homeless man? Very quickly, I'll tell you that. Oh, he does. He just fluffed his beard out. He instantly looked like he was sitting on a step in Oshawa. So how would you compare having the right tools for having a beard so that you can, have a nice looking beard and be nice and trimmed and the ladies will love it, with compared to the importance of having the right tools and equipment when you're fishing? Just to add to that, if you have the wrong tools to try to groom your beard, terrible things can happen. So how would you compare that to fishing?
So it's important to get the right stuff. Like I said, you can apply, oils with your hands and your fingers, and that's fine, but it won't get right down to the root. Especially with my beard, like, I actually need to comb like the oil right through, or else I will get itchy and dry skin underneath because it's pulling all this moisture out of your skin to have this hair here. So there are a few things that you actually need to keep the beard looking good. Same thing with fishing. Is if you want to go for muskie, you need gear that will be able to cast muskie baits. If you want to go, for carp more efficiently, you're going to need carp gear that can handle fighting a fish like that, or casting like your heavy weights and whatnot. So there are things that you need to effectively target fish. Now, yeah, I can grow a beard and I'll just have to deal with dry skin if I don't have the right stuff. Or I could just get the right equipment. Now, I don't need to get, a gilded comb and, made of like whale ivory and, brush it through with some oils from the time of Cleopatra and brush it through. Like, no, I don't need that stuff. I got some stuff off Amazon for $30. I'm like, I'm done. Like a full kit with everything I need.
Yeah.
So there's same thing with gear. There's a sweet spot where you can get gear that is suited for different scenarios or for different species or techniques that aren't the super high-end crazy stuff. Like I have lots of rods that are suited for one or two techniques, and I own 0 G Loomis. For me, I've never had the need to go for a G Loomis. They're great rods, don't get me wrong. Would I fish one if I had one? Absolutely. They're amazing rods. But the price point, I know that I can get a rod that I will be satisfied with for between $150 to $250, maybe $300. They go on sale, like, hey, get a $300 rod for $200. Like, that's awesome. I like finding that sweet spot where you get, an effective tool that works really well for when you need it to, without going, crazy high-end kind of custom or super bougie.
Well, and like we said before, you don't need high-end stuff.
And that's my personal preference, though.
Yeah. And again, me and Andrew have different personal preferences, and guess what? We both catch fish. So I always say to people, fish don't care what you're holding in your hand. They don't care, and they don't know. They're not like, oh man, that guy's holding a high-end St. Croix rod. I gotta bite this jig. They don't know, right? Now, I'm not saying that there isn't a difference between high-end gear and more budget gear. There definitely is. I know people saying, it's the same thing, man. I can feel the same. No, I'll ask Andrew some questions right now. Is a rod, it may be higher end, is a higher end rod designed to, skip baits under docks, going to cast a bait better under docks than a budget price rod?
Yes.
Will a higher end rod be more sensitive when it's designed for like bottom contact to feel more bites? Will you feel more bites?
Yes.
Yes. So like there are things about rods, like what I find when I buy a higher end rod and it's for a specific thing, like say like I want a flipping rod and has a slightly softer tip. So when I pitch, it loads and actually helps me pitch better and more accurately. I noticed when I bought a slightly nicer rod, I would be able to get my bait exactly where I wanted as compared to having just like a stiff, lifeless rod that doesn't load very well. Now, and that being said, you don't need to buy high-end rods for every combo. So I always say to people like, I would never buy a high-end frog rod because I'm casting a frog. This is just my opinion. I'm seeing the blow up. I don't have to worry about sensitivity. I don't have to worry about the rod being super light. I'm just casting a frog out, reeling it over lily pads. And when I see a blow up, I hopefully wait a few seconds and then I slam the hook. So all I need is a fairly stout rod that's not going to break. So like my frog rod for years is like $100. That's it. Do I ever like want a higher end frog rod? Sure. Like eventually one day I'll get one, but for the last 5 or 6 years, it's been $100 and it works every single year and it doesn't break. That's totally fine. But at the same time, if I'm fishing like, bottom contact, like flipping or something where I need some sensitivity, I do have some higher end rods for that. So be choosy where you're going to put your money. Don't worry about some combos, like say like a chatterbait rod. Again, you're just reeling in and the fish grabs it and you have a fish on. You don't have to worry about like feeling the bite.
An ugly stick would be a great choice. It's soft, flexible. It's great for crankbaits, for chatterbait caster and retrieve stuff. Why not? You can use it if you want. You can use it for whatever you want, but it works effectively for that. I wouldn't want to go bottom bouncing with it though.
No, exactly. Again, I worked at the tackle store and I'll tell you so many people that I sold rods to. And sometimes I try to get people like, listen, that price point you're at right now, it's okay. I'm not trying to upsell you. I'm just trying to be like, I'm trying to look out for you because you're not going to be happy with this in a year. Spend the extra $40 and get this rod. It has a warranty. It's sensitive. It's made of graphite. It's going to be a lot better for you. And usually they'd come back eventually and be like, you're right. I want to buy another one, So sometimes spending a little bit more money, like buy ones, cry ones, can be worth it to you. So that's the thing. I thought this was a pretty cool episode. I mean, I had a few people ask us why we were growing beards. I don't know, just for fun. It's always been something that we've wanted to do. I think for me, it's just more like, I was more interested to see if I could do it. Like I knew Andrew could do it. He was just like, phoom. I wasn't surprised at all, but it has been a fun journey.
The most growth I ever had before was I was sick for like a few weeks. So I had 3 weeks growth and I was like, I like this. Yeah. And eventually, I just started growing the beard, made sure the wife was okay with it. And that's always important. And she's okay with the beard. And then I don't tell her what I spent on fishing equipment this year.
So anyway, I thought you guys would find that a fun podcast. We try to keep them entertaining. I know a lot of people listening to them at the shop or on their way to work, on their way home from their fishing trips. So we hope this is entertaining for you. One thing I would ask you guys, and I said guys for a reason, if you have a beard, send us a picture of you fishing with a beard and we'll repost it on our Instagram. Hashtag AOA beard life. So anyway, before we end this episode, I thought we could do a few AOA Q&A because I have a bunch of questions. Yeah, so I actually put up a question up on Instagram about an hour ago, and I was like, hopefully we get some questions before the podcast, but we actually got decent amount, about 15. So I thought I'd go through some of these. I said, ask us anything, cool questions only. So you guys did not disappoint. None of these are lame at all. There's only like 2 lame ones. So here's a question from Uncle Brian Carrot. He says, desert island scenario, 1 rod, 1 reel, 1 lure.
Okay. Is it saltwater?
Let's just keep it like Ontario based. So like 1 rod for Ontario, 1 rod reel.
I would say a medium heavy St. Croix Triumph rod. I have faith in that it won't snap on me it's the only rod I have. And, I could cast anything with that spinning, not bait. I could go spinning. And then for reel, I'd have to go with a classic Stratic, Shimano Stratic. It's a bulletproof reel. Yeah.
Bulletproof.
And one lure?
One lure.
Chatterbait.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything will hit a chatterbait. So I'm going to go super tough on my combo. Now, again, I'm a bit bougie with some of my rods and reels, but I'm going to buy an Ugly Stick Elite. Okay? Because that rod is literally indestructible. Mm-hmm. I'm on a desert island. This is the only rod I'm going to get. So an Ugly Stick Elite, that's the one with the cork handle. So it's a little nicer than the regular Ugly Stick. Still is like completely bendable and tieable in a knot. And then I'm actually going to get the Ugly Stick Reel, the one that's like built tough, 11-year warranty. You pick it up, it weighs like 20 ounces.
Like a pound and a half.
I picked it up at the fishing store. The reel is so heavy. I was like, oh my goodness. And you reel it in. It feels like they're using marbles as ball bearings. I was like, oh, but it feels like it'll never break. It literally feels like it's never going to break.
I love how their marketing for their stuff, I will say is absolutely awesome. Like as much as we joke around about Ugly Stick being like low end, I do love how it's like, hey, you want something that will never break? Look at this rod that can, like he's like tie into a bow tie. Like, look at this reel. It's made of machined iron steel from the Canadian Railroad. You can drop this thing off a cliff and it's fine.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't need that in a combo, but okay.
I'll tell you, I can't remember that many Ugly Sticks coming back when I worked at the fishing store. Yeah. We had lots of rods come back. Again, a lot of the rods you buy, they're mass produced in China. So the quality control isn't the best. So you get a lot back. People would be like, oh, it literally snapped on my first cast. It's like, yeah, it's a defect in the graphite, right? But I can't recall that many at all Ugly Sticks ever coming back. And if they ever came back, it was because like a guide popped out. I know a lot of people fish Ugly Sticks. And again, I haven't fished one in years, but I would definitely do that because they're great rods. Mm-hmm. Here's another interesting story or question. This is from Paul. He says, would you rather have a 4,000 size reel with backing or a 3,000 size reel with no backing?
I would say I'd go for a 3,000 with no backing.
Yeah. I'd say,
yeah. Is he talking, I guess 3,000, I guess that's spinning reel, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say a 3,000 with no backing. Like I know you're probably never going to get down to the backing anyways on a 4,000, and it's a high enough gear ratio on most of them you can get anyways. You don't really need to go, I get an extra 2 inches on that pickup if it's the 4,000 size. It's like,
yeah. It depends what you're doing, I guess, because generally speaking, say like Shimano, for instance, Shimano 2,500 and 3,000 are the exact reel. It's just the 3,000 has a slightly deeper spool, and the 4,000
for salmon.
Yeah, the 4,000 is a bigger reel. Yeah. It has a bigger drag. It has more capacity, so your drag is going to be better, a little more smooth because the washers are bigger in there. And the diameter of the spool is bigger, so you will be able to cast slightly farther. So it really depends what you're doing. I honestly have tons of 4,000 reels, too many of them. Yeah, I do use backing, but if I'm fishing salmon, I don't use backing because sometimes a Chinook will take you right into that, and I don't want there to ever be a connection knot. But I'd say if you're looking to fish for a big fish, I do the 4,000. But if you're fishing for like walleye, bass, where you'll never get to the bottom, I just use a 3,000, even a 2,500. Here's a question from Tony. Open for Bassness. He says, would Andrew rather get stuck in the woods with a bear or Jesse?
I've seen this video going around. A bear.
Andrew has been stuck in the woods many times with me.
I've also been stuck in the woods with a bear. So being with Jesse was far less terrifying.
Here's a good question from the morning voice. Lure's got to catch the fisherman first. Which lure would get you to bite every time?
No, I think he's mentioning though, like visually though, and I would have to say like custom baits, like Hashimoto concepts, right? Those things, it makes me want to buy them whenever I see the paint jobs on it. I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
I don't care how that works, but I want it.
Yeah. Lures that I buy a lot of that I don't need, jerk baits. Usually when Andrew will tell, I'll be like, Andrew, don't let me buy any jerk baits.
Jesse's like, look, it comes in a matte perch pattern.
I'll pick up jerk baits like crazy. I specifically bought that Plano jerk bait box that only holds 20 jerk baits. I'm like, you can't get more than this, even though it is already, but I can only bring 20 with me. And Andrew's like, you don't need 20. I was like, of course I do. You never know what the air, water temperature, diffusion of the sun. Here's a question. Dan says, do you set up your rods using the line strength and lure weights listed on the rod itself? No.
Never look at it.
At all?
No.
So you're going to put like 65-pound line on a light action rod?
Yeah, I don't care for the line weight on my rod. I don't care about. For what the rod can cast for the weight it's rated for, that I do pay attention to. But for the line, I mean, I consider myself smart enough not to try and boat flip, a 4-pound bass using 60-pound braid on an ultralight. I just won't. So I'll do my best to, what the rod can handle, and I'll just have a looser drag or something like that. Maybe I'm playing with fire. I don't know, but it's never been a concern for me.
A lot of rods that you buy, it'll be the line rating will be for monofilament ratings or fluorocarbon ratings. So you'll pick up, say, like a medium heavy rod, and it says 12 to 17 pound line, but then you're going to put 30-pound braid on it. So the line rating is generally more of a monofilament rating. If you put 30-pound braid on the rod, that's fine. That's what most people are going to do for, like, say, a medium heavy rod. For me, I used to use all different kinds of braid. Now I only use 2. I use 30-pound. And I use 50-pound. And that's for bait casting. For spinning, it's just like 10, and then I'll put any leader I want on it. With bait casting, it's 30 for like spinner baits, chatter baits, top water, stuff like that. And then if I'm fishing heavy cover, it's 40 or 50. Like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to go crazy and like have like specific braids for everything. It makes it more annoying too.
For my biggest tips for when I'm spooling a reel with braid, I will always get it spooled by the tackle shop, because they'll spool like a 300 size reel with 50-pound 9-strand braid for $15-20. And I can't buy like 4-strand spider wire for that.
Yeah, it's true. So yeah, you don't have to stay in that. And when it comes to lure weights too, I find like that is more of a suggestion. That's what the rod manufacturer is saying. This is where this rod performs its best, right? Mm-hmm. So for instance, like the other day, I was casting a 1-ounce swim bait on a medium heavy rod that was only rated to 3/4 ounce. That's fine. It's not that much heavier, but I'm not going to chuck a 2-ounce glide bait on that. The rod's not going to handle it.
And you're also not like leaning back and whipping it as hard as you can either.
Yeah, you definitely have to cast difference. But at the same time, the reason for that is that rod doesn't have the power to get done what you need with a bigger bait. So like say I'm chucking a bigger like swim bait with a big 9-aught beast hook in it, and I'm using a medium heavy rod and 30-pound line. When a fish grabs it, I won't be able to set the hook hard enough to get that hook through the bait into the fish's mouth. So you have to go up to a heavy or an extra heavy for that. So you have to, there's lots of factors to consider. We get questions all the time. People message us on Instagram and be like, hey, what would you recommend for this combo? What would you recommend for that? Mm-hmm. Send us a message. We love talking fishing. We're more than happy to direct you. Even if you're trying to make a decision, like Andrew will know, like when I'm trying to buy a rod, sometimes I'll think about it for months. I'm like, no, this one or this one. I go to the store multiple times. I'm playing with them. So I had this one guy message me, funny story. And he was just like, hey, I'm looking at these 2 models. I'm like, okay, I actually have one of the models he was talking about, and I almost bought the other one. So I knew a lot about them. And he was like, I'm pretty much convinced I want this one. And I was like, okay, what are you going to use it for? And I'm just like talking him through it. And he's telling me this. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And then at the end, he's like, okay, I'm convinced now I made a good choice. It's like, okay, good. Now you can go to the store and buy it, right? So feel free to do that. Why don't we answer one more question? Do you believe bananas on the boat are bad luck? We actually did a podcast about this.
The only banana that's allowed on my boat is Jesse. I'm not superstitious.
No, we're not.
At all.
Well, actually, we had one of the best days muskie fishing ever, and we had like multiple bananas in the boat, and I forgot about them too. I was like, oh, hey.
Jesse's like, yeah, we get back to the boat launch, and Jesse's like, banana time. He's like, do you want one? I'm like,
you're like, it was a great day. I need potassium. So anyway, that was an awesome episode. We would like to thank again everyone that's listened to this episode. I wanted to read one review. We actually get reviews all the time, which we really appreciate. And I'd like to read just one of these because some of these are just absolutely fantastic. Some people are like 5 stars and it's like, great podcast, thumbs up. I'm like, cool. Some of them are actually like well written out and very nice. So I thought I could read this one. This one is from a guy called On the Road with Fly Rod. He says 5 stars. Entertaining and highly informative podcast focusing their attention on all things related in Ontario. Love that these guys are small craft, backcountry, and off the beaten path focused. Great suggestions and reviews on gear and tackle while promoting local shops and gear manufacturers shows these guys are dedicated to building the Ontario fishing community. Also, great sound quality. Great sound quality. This is not a podcast that sounds like it's recorded in a cave with a tape deck. Keep up the great work. You know what? Just for that, we are going to record a podcast in a cave with a tape deck. What's a tape deck? Just kidding. We're old enough to know what that is.
We should get some of those old, like, some springy, like, microphones. Be like, this week on Fishing with Andrew and Jesse, we're going to have... It's like the old 1920s radio announcer.
Yeah. Here's another one from I Catch Dinks, one of our classic guys that listens to this episode, or the podcast every week. He says, great audio, great topics, no ads, funny guys. Funny looking anyway. Very informative. Definitely watch the YouTube show to catch a glimpse of Andrew's mustache and beard now. So anyway, we'd like to thank everyone who writes a review. Please write us a review because it not only makes us laugh and smile when we see them, but it also helps us do better on the podcast chart, which helps us get awesome sponsors as well. So we're going to end this with the quote of the week. And to handle that, we have Andrew.
Pro tip, everyone. If your hairline's getting weird, just try growing a beard.
True that.